Thanks for inviting us in. This is the Delphi Debrief here on WTHR+. We saw the first full day of jury deliberations at the Carroll County Courthouse today. The jurors now deciding whether Richard Allen is the man who killed Abby Williams and Libby German back in 2017. In a moment, you'll hear from our WTHR legal analyst, Katie Jackson-Lindsay. But first, let's get right to Delphi with senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel and Emily Longnecker. They spent the day outside the courthouse as we all await this verdict. Bob and Em?
Hey, Scott. Well, we got here early this morning.
Very.
And I think folks were eagerly anticipating a verdict today. And we can tell you, no verdict today.
It did not come.
It did not come, and there was a lot of waiting today.
A lot of waiting. People standing outside, talking to each other. Some of us kind of standing close to the courthouse steps in anticipation of, being ready to get in there as soon as we hear something. We've been told we might have somewhat of a heads up so that we know, and we're ready.
We were ready, no verdict, and we'll kind of explain to you what happened today. It was about 8:55, just before 9 o'clock, that jurors arrived here at the Carroll County Courthouse. They left their vehicles, they went up to the third floor, and they began their deliberations. They got in 2 hours of deliberations yesterday before they took a break. Today, it was about 7 hours, give or take. We don't know how long their lunch break was today. So up to this point, probably a total of about 8.5 hours of deliberations that the jury has had so far. And again, it's important to point out, there's a lot of evidence here. There's just a tremendous amount that this jury has to sort through. And I think there was a feeling today, being Friday, that we might get a verdict, even though they've only been deliberating for a relatively short time, because there's that idea that this jury has been sequestered for a long time. This was day number 26 since these jurors reported for jury duty. It was day number 23 that they have been sequestered away from their families in Allen County. So I think a lot of folks thought, hey, this has been a long 3+ weeks, almost a month for these jurors, and they are going to be highly motivated to be able to come to a decision and a verdict. But keep in mind, this is a process, and there's so much over the course of 17 days of testimony that they needed to consider that we did not.
No.
We did not get a jury today. And while there was a lot going inside the courthouse, interesting to note, we're not allowed in there during this process.
No.
We saw some people filing in and out to pay their taxes and to do some things. We saw some county employees going into the courthouse, but for the most part, unusual situation here where the courthouse was pretty much on lockdown.
Yeah.
No one allowed in and out of the courthouse who wasn't there for very specific business.
Right. We were allowed briefly in if we needed to use the restroom, mercifully. So that thank goodness, right? That was the one thing. And other than that, we were outside here with everyone else. And there were a lot of people outside here, probably about 60 to 70. And the interesting thing is, it's local, some folks from Delphi. It is the news media, and not just the local news media from all over the country, some international.
Yes.
And also a lot of folks from all across the country. A lot of YouTubers, a lot of true crime enthusiasts have made their way here to Delphi, and they are camped out outside with the rest of us as we await this. And a lot of people, some of the YouTubers, some of the folks had made signs all around the courthouse. And the interesting thing about that is we've watched the vans bring in the jury each day, but actually today, to avoid those signs, they didn't want the jury to see all of these signs that were out here today, so they brought them out a different way so they wouldn't see all the public standing out here holding their signs or with their signs that that they made, and we've got some video of some of these signs. I mean, they're all across the board. We can show you some justice for Abby and Libby. The world is watching. Some signs even in support of Richard Allen, some criticizing the investigation, some even critical of Judge Gall. And there was a final sign here, today is the day. We saw that sign today, and what was significant about that is today is the day is something that the families of Abby and Libby said over and over again when all of this started, and for so many years they were waiting for someone to be arrested, and so they would say, today is the day that there is going to be a break in the case. And I think, you know, that sign today is the day.
Yes.
Somebody was hoping for a verdict, but today was not the day. But you know, this is a case that has gripped this community, changed this community. Our colleague Samantha Johnson is here. You've been out and about in the community, seen the signs, talked to some folks, and you know, people have just really opened up and talked about how this has changed them.
Yeah, the message we keep hearing time and time again is no matter the verdict, when this is all said and done, they are just hoping and praying for peace for this community, for everyone involved. And there's one thing, especially as we narrow into what could be the final hours of this case, one thing is inevitable and is unavoidable, I would say, and that's the colors purple and blue. And the last few days, we've really noticed that. We've known for weeks now that the street lamps around the Carroll County Courthouse have been wrapped in those purple and blue ribbons representing the favorite colors of both Abby and Libby. But now and today, we started noticing that some of the businesses here in downtown have started painting their windows. They're writing Abby and Libby in purple and blue. They're hanging posters outside their windows too. And I think that just is a good reminder of why we're here in the first place. All the drama surrounding this case, all the back and forth, all the attention it's gotten, it's a good reminder on every street corner why we're here. And we're seeing even more of that. There were folks painting once the sun had set, Abby and Libby. So it's a good reminder.
You know, I went into the Pizza King across the street today, and have been in there many a time on many a hearing and throughout the years being in this community. And there was a sign up there that was in there in those early days of the investigation. And there was a picture of Abby and Libby. It's a flyer, and then there's a picture of Bridge Guy there. And then on a sign, it says, Abby and Libby, justice will be served. And I saw that today when I was in there just grabbing a soda really quick, and it kind of hit me because I remember seeing that sign in those early days, in those early years, and that sign is still hanging up. So I thought it kind of spoke to how this has stayed with this community all this time.
Absolutely. And again, the focus for so many folks out here is remembering, like you said, why we're here, and that is the tragic death of two teenagers. Samantha, know you've been here since early this morning. Thank you for joining us as our team coverage here continues. We will let you get some rest here this evening as we continue our Delphi debrief. Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks,
All
Sam.
right. So, Emily, want to talk about, I think, the expectations coming out here today. A lot of folks, as we mentioned early on, were expecting there to be a verdict, I think, today.
Well, I think so, because remember, the jury got a chance to deliberate for 2.5 hours yesterday, and they went back to their hotel early. They did not stay until 4 o'clock when Judge Gall gave them their instructions yesterday. She said, you know, you have the option of staying past 4 o'clock if you want, and they didn't. They got out a little earlier. And I think there was some discussion this morning and just trying to figure out, okay, did they get in that jury room yesterday, and did they maybe take a quick straw poll to see where everyone's heads were at, and then maybe did they just go home to say, okay, let's sleep on it, and they'll come back in and convene for a little bit today and have something. And that just wasn't the case. And so then you started to think really about the enormity of everything that they have to consider. 17 days of testimony, 64 witnesses, and again, these are 12 people that have to come to the same agreement. They all have to agree on this verdict to hand it down. 12 different people with different experiences, with different, different thoughts.
You sat on a jury.
I
sat
did.
on a jury, and you know what it's like to try to get 12 people to agree on something.
And it's very hard. It is very hard, again, because you bring all of your life experiences to the table. Everybody wants to discuss and have their say and bring up questions, and so it is very difficult for all 12 people to agree on something. And there is back and forth. I've been through it. There is back and forth and discussion, and how much do you try and convince somebody of your side? You never want to feel like you're pulling someone over away from what they truly believe, but people point things out to each other, and so it's a process. So you weren't, in the end, I don't think either of us were surprised that we didn't have anything today,
No,
right?
not at all. And earlier today, I had a chance to talk to our colleague back down in Indianapolis, our 13 News legal analyst, and she was kind of sharing with us what some of the reasons that she anticipated that this could be perhaps even a longer process here, more than just a day or two, that it could even go well into next week. Katie Jackson Lindsay told me that what she anticipated today that the jurors are really focusing on was trying to narrow in on those timelines, not only of the crime scene and when witnesses were out there and saw Bridge Guy, but then when Richard Allen was out there, and that timeline, and when the cell phones stopped moving, and when the pictures were taken, and so the timeline is a big part of what they had to figure out. And she also pointed out that there's a lot of really contradictory information and testimony.
Yes.
And some of the examples that the jury is really going to have to sort through is the testimony on the ballistics, as far as that cartridge that was found at the crime scene. Both the state witnesses and also the defense witnesses, completely different testimony, 180 degrees difference that the jurors heard. And in addition to that, also the mental health testimony, the psychologists and the psychiatrists who testified for the state and for the defense, completely different information. Again, 180 degree difference that the jury's hearing, and they've got to figure out the credibility, who they want to believe, who they don't believe, and make sense of all that.
I mean, and I have to imagine that they might also be going over all of that cell phone data that we heard about, right? I mean, you had the state's witness talking about all the data they pulled, but then the defense had their own person come in and look at that data, and some of the things were obviously the same. 2:13, Libby starts rolling that video on Bridge Guy as she sees him behind Abby. 2:32, the phone stops moving, right? That was the same. But then you heard that testimony last week. I think it was last week now. It's time is interesting at this point, but where the defense expert testified that in looking at the data, that headphones had been plugged in to that phone at, I think it was 5:45, and then unplugged at 10:32, and there was some question about that. And then you had the state responding to that and saying, well, dirt and water and those things can make it look like something has been plugged into a phone. But then we learned that this when he rebutted that for the state, he had Googled that and found that out, right? I mean, so the defense was pointing that out. So I feel like the phone, I would imagine that the phone, I would think that is something that they would be talking about.
These very technical, very scientific issues that the jury, and this is a jury, by the way, that through their questions has made it very clear that there are certain members of this jury that have a lot of expertise in different areas. And by the way, that testimony that you were referencing that perhaps was last week, that was just 3 days ago. And the reason that I'm pointing that out is because we know this is day 19 and all this, but after a while, it all starts to run together.
It really
It's
does.
hard to keep track of what days we heard things, and we have hundreds of pages of notes that we took. Some of the jurors, they have folders that are this big. I mean, it looked like it was 6, 7, 8 inches that they have to sort through of notes that they were taking, evidence and exhibits that they got. So again, it's hard for us to keep track of all this stuff and what days this happened and what we heard. The jury's going to be going through the exact same thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine. When you referenced, you see a couple jurors come in and they have you're right, a big, thick file, one of those collapsible folders that they, and then some people don't come in. I've noticed some people not coming in with anything. They don't have anything in their hands. So I always think, I mean, being a note taker myself, I always think like, aren't you taking the notes? But maybe some people can remember things differently. And I think what's been interesting for us too is we're taking notes, and sometimes we hear different things. So I have to imagine as they're sitting there deliberating, and they can't pull transcripts of the testimony. They have to go on their memory
or notes.
Or their notes.
Yeah.
And so what do you do if somebody wrote down something different than you wrote down? How do you reconcile that? I think that could also be something that comes up.
So Scott, needless to say, we are basically 8 or 9 hours into these jurors deliberating, and certainly from our perspective, no surprise at all today that we do not have a verdict yet.
All right, so I have a couple of questions regarding the jury. If the jury has a question about this case and they want it addressed either to the judge or one side or the other, how does that work? Are the media allowed in? And what happens to Richard Allen? He's at the Cass County Jail, 25 minutes away. Does he come over to listen to the questions that the jurors may end up having as they deliberate?
Yeah, Scott, he has that option too if he wants, and his defense attorneys and the state can also be there. We have not been allowed in there, and there was really no guidance given to us yesterday by Judge Gall as she was reading the jury instructions. And she also talked about that deliberation room in the courthouse is pretty small, so she had offered if the jury wanted to come into the courtroom to look at exhibits and things and kind of spread out, that they could do that. So I'm not sure if that's a reason why we're not being let in, but during, if they have a question. But yes, Richard Allen can be there, can be present. He is in the Cass County Jail. That is about a 25-minute drive away. So that would take some time to get him here so that he could hear, what those questions are. But this is a jury that throughout this trial has had a lot of questions, a lot of technical questions, a lot of really informed questions. So I would think that they would have some more questions.
I would think so too, and from that perspective, I would think that we would expect even this weekend,
yes,
that we could see. I think if people start seeing the motorcade with Richard Allen pulling up to the courthouse, everyone's going to be like, "Oh, we have a verdict. We have a verdict."
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Because again, if the jury has questions, Scott, and they want to review some of the evidence, Richard Allen and his attorneys have a right to be in the courtroom, and I would expect at some point this weekend that we very well may see Richard Allen back here and this jury asking for more information inside the courtroom.
All right, I'm also interested in the families. Are we seeing Libby and Abby's families hanging out there outside the courthouse? Do they go home? Are they hanging out somewhere else waiting for a verdict? And what about Richard Allen's wife, mother, daughter, who were part of the witness? I mean, are they all hanging out there as well?
I have not seen Kathy Allen today or Janice. I did see a few friends of theirs, people that I recognized as people sitting with them in their seats during court. I did not see the Patties today, so I think you might have, or someone did.
Well,
no?
I think that, there's a good explanation for that. I did not see them either. We are right now on the north side of the courthouse, and right here on the north side, this is the entrance where the media and the public would go in. And today, by the way, we did not have a media pass, so we had to be in line with everyone else, very much hoping to be able to be inside the courtroom if a verdict did come today. So we were camped out pretty much right in this spot throughout the entire day. The families actually have been meeting with the attorneys for lunch and things like that during lunch breaks, and that is on the exact opposite side from the courthouse. So the fact that we were pretty much here today, Scott, we would not have seen the families. We certainly didn't see them come in and out of the courthouse. I did hear that some of the family members were in the vicinity today, but
Yeah.
I did not see them.
I mean, and during the trial, they would come in the same door,
Yes.
the front door, everybody together, right? You would see the girls' families there, Richard Allen's families coming through, everyone going through the same metal detector. We were too, but as Bob said, we were pretty much camped out here because we did not have one of those 12 golden media passes today, and so we were both, in this position of, okay, we've got to be ready to go if they say that there's a verdict, because, and it's probably too dark to pan down, but there is a whole line of chairs lined up of people here that'll be camping out all night because they want the opportunity to get in that courtroom if in fact there is a verdict. So you're kind of jockeying for position a lot of times if you don't have a media pass. So
And we want to make sure that we are in position to be in the courtroom to be able to bring viewers information from what we see inside the courtroom when there is a verdict.
And give us, our viewers, an idea about when a verdict is reached. How does the media learn about this? How soon after you learn that there's a verdict will we be hearing it? And tell us a little bit about that process.
So when the jury has a verdict, our understanding is that there's a media coalition of all of the local, state, national, international media who are following this case. And in large part, we've all been working together because of the fact there are no cameras in the courtroom. We've been sharing these 12 media passes. So when there is a verdict, the media coalition will get a text so that we know that we are about to find out what that verdict is. And our understanding is it'll take an hour and a half, 2 hours from the time that we learn that there is a verdict until the time that that verdict will be announced. And again, as Emily said, Richard Allen is not here. He's at the Cass County Jail, which is roughly about a half hour away. He'll get a police escort here to the courthouse, but it will give other family members and law enforcement and other folks who want and need to be here at the time that the verdict is read a chance to be able to get here. So we will have a little bit of advance notice, and the folks who are lined up, I mean the folks who have 12 media passes on the day that the verdict is read will be inside the courtroom, and then there will be roughly 18, 20, 24 additional seats in the courtroom once the families are going to have a chance to be in there for both Abby and Libby's families, also Richard Allen's families. You've got then defense seats that are set up. You have prosecution seats that are set up. About 20 to 24 members of the public, then there will be additional seats for them too. And there's been a very heavy law enforcement presence here, Scott. Dozens and dozens. We know that there are 36 separate law enforcement agencies that have been helping to provide security, not only here at the courthouse, but also escorting the jury back and forth to their hotel and around the hotel there. So they are very much hoping and trying to keep this as orderly as possible, especially leading up to what we expect to be a verdict. We just don't know exactly when that verdict is coming.
Okay, and we're going to get some information about Saturday jury deliberations from both of you in a moment. But first, Rich and I talked with our legal expert, Katie Jackson-Lindsay, today about today's deliberations.
What should we make at this point of the length of these deliberations?
Well, you really can't make much of it. First of all, every jury is different. Every jury is made up of different people. And so it's really hard to make any assumptions one way or the other about how long they're taking. As trial lawyers, we often have superstitions about what a short verdict means or what a long verdict means. But having done this for 16 years on both sides, having done nearly 100 juries and about half and half on each side, I can tell you that there's never any rhyme or reason, and you cannot put any hard and fast rules on how long deliberations are taking.
I guess it's fair to say that they're at least being thorough about the job they have in front of them.
Absolutely, and that's the only thing that we can glean from it, is that they are doing exactly what they took an oath to do, and they are doing exactly what we expect them to do and what we would want them to do if we were either the family of Abby and Libby or if we were Richard Allen, because what we know for sure is that they're taking it very seriously and they're taking their time to review it and taking their time to consider everyone's thoughts about which way to go.
Would you consider tomorrow to be at all sort of an indicator of where we're headed in terms of maybe they would like to get this done and not have another week of deliberations? They won't deliberate on Sunday. Can you make any prediction about what we might see tomorrow?
Not necessarily, because like you said, they've been out a total of about 9 hours right now. And so when you think about that, that's really not a whole lot of time, considering that they've looked at nearly 800 pieces of evidence and they've heard from 64 witnesses over the course of several weeks. And so if you just think of the time that it takes to rehash the testimony of each of those witnesses, especially when there's conflicting testimony, 9 hours isn't really that long. So if they took another day tomorrow, I still wouldn't think that that's an extraordinarily long time or any amount of time that we should be particularly concerned about.
Remind us of the 4 verdicts that the jury is considering.
So Richard Allen is charged with 2 counts of knowing and intentional murder for each girl, alleging that he knowingly and intentionally killed them. And then he's charged with 2 counts of what's called felony murder for each girl. And those counts are charged under a theory of he didn't necessarily have to be the killer, but if he was the kidnapper and they died as a result of the kidnapping, then that's enough to find him guilty of felony murder.
Do you think this is all not guilty or all guilty in this case? Do you think there would be any reason why the jury would split up the verdicts at all?
Well, based on the 2 different theories of murder charged here, I could see a scenario where they could split up the verdict. And I think to some extent the facts may have lent themselves to that, because the knowing and intentional murder essentially says he acted alone and he was the killer, right? But the 2 felony murder charges suggest that he could have simply been the kidnapper and he could have been acting with another person. And so throughout the trial, we heard some testimony about an individual who lived close by, and even the defense in their closing made some statements that could allow the jury to draw an inference that that other person was involved. And so in that case, the jury could conclude that they don't necessarily think that Richard Allen was the person who killed the girls, but if they believe he kidnapped them, then that's enough to split the verdicts and find him guilty simply of felony murder.
That's Katie Jackson-Lindsay. She is a former deputy prosecutor and current criminal defense attorney. She's been with us every night of this trial. Let's bring back Bob and Emily once again from Delphi. Are these jurors, they're hanging out at the hotel tonight, sequestered. Are they allowed to talk about the case amongst each other tonight at the hotel, or are they restricted from doing that, saying that they can only talk about the case when they resume at the courthouse tomorrow morning?
Yeah, they're not allowed to talk about it when they are not together. In fact, yesterday when Judge Gall was giving them all instructions, she said basically if one person has to leave the room to use the restroom, you have to stop talking about the case. You can only talk about the case when everybody is present in the room. And each day of the trial, when they would leave for the day, she would tell them, now remember, there's no talking about this case. Once you leave here, no sharing of information, no discussing it, leave, go home, rest. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And that's...
Yeah. Certainly the deliberations can only be taking place when all 15 of the jurors, 12 jurors plus 3 alternates, right. There were 4, we're down, we lost one very early in the trial. So there are 15 jurors right now, and the deliberations can only take place when all 15 of them are together in the same place.
Right.
So
they'll be back here tomorrow. It's our understanding at 9 a.m.
Yes.
They can deliberate through 4, and if they want to stay longer, they have that option. Then Judge Gall has told them Sunday they have the day off. And if they don't reach a verdict tomorrow, if they don't have a decision tomorrow, they'll be off on Sunday, and then they'll be back Monday, again starting all over at 9 a.m. again through 4, and if they want to, they can stay longer. So.
And as far as expectations at this point, again, a lot of folks had the expectations that we would have a verdict today. At this point, I don't have any more expectations. No. Because we sat through almost all of the testimony right. that these jurors heard, and it is so complex, and there are so many issues, scientific, health, mental health, electronic and technology issues. There's so many different things that these jurors have to consider in order to reach a verdict that I expect this is going to take a while.
Because conflicting things too, and they have to decide, in those jury instructions, if you have testimony that conflicts, the instructions, you basically have to decide which witness is more credible. So
right. So Scott, we are wrapped up here for Friday. We will be back again tomorrow, Saturday. If it continues on, day off on Sunday, as Emily mentioned, and we'll pick things back up on Monday again, and we will continue to be here as we have been for every day of this trial until we have a verdict. Back
All
to you.
right, Bob Siegel and Emily Longnecker, thanks so much for your comprehensive coverage. We invite our viewers to be following them on social media, because just as soon as they have any information about these deliberations, they will break it there, and of course on all of the WTHR social media platforms. Have a good night, gang. Thank you so much for your great work out there in Carroll County. And we break down the Delphi murders trial every weeknight here at 10. Right here on WTHR+. You can also find our ongoing coverage, including detailed reports on each day of this trial, by going to WTHR.com/Delphi. You can also scan that QR code. Thanks for joining us.